Good morning. Good morning. Many of you here have known Vel for years, decades, half centuries even. My relationship started with her in 2013 when I began to produce a documentary on her life. I'd heard about all the firsts. First African-American woman graduated from UW Law, the first African-American and first woman Milwaukee alderman, the first African-American woman on the Democratic National Committee, the first African-American judge in Wisconsin, the first African-American and first female Secretary of State. The list was incredibly impressive. When I finally got Vel on the phone and asked her if she'd be interested in sitting down for our cameras and talk a little bit about her life and her accomplishments, she said, yes, but I've only got 2 hours. No problem, no problem. I just wanted to get in the room with her. So we sit down on a Tuesday morning, the lights are set, the camera is rolling, and we begin. 2 hours later, I informed Vel that the 2 hours she allotted us are up, and I thank her for her time. She glances up at me, smiles, and says, well, we can go on a little bit longer. 5 hours later, we wrap that interview up. For the next 6 months, I would show up at the Music Conservatory on North Prospect, walk next door to Vel's apartment, meet her there in the lobby, and slowly and safely walk her back to the conservatory for another interview. Each interview, she'd enthrall the film crew with stories of her life as an alderperson, her friendship with JFK, strategizing with the Reverend King. Working with Vel could be difficult as well. She could be stubborn. She could be tired. She was a notorious night owl. And her life wasn't without controversy. But what I came to know about Vel was that she was a genuinely open and sweet person who always asked about my daughters, a voracious reader who was continually interested in politics, and a kind woman who never failed to stop and talk to a fellow Milwaukeean with a smile on her face. Most importantly, what I learned was that Vel was excited about sharing her life. As most of her family and friends passed away, she was left with her memories. And these memories, the president she'd worked with, the civil rights accomplishments she'd fought for, her playful and romantic relationship with her husband, were so important to her. But I learned that they weren't just important to an aging person reflecting back on her life. They mattered to her because her story, all that she accomplished in the face of the impossible odds, mattered to the future of her community and the future of our country. I saw this during those interviews. I saw this when she would be speaking to a group of college students. The kids were smitten with this feisty 90-year-old, but this 90-year-old was looking intently to the future. When we finally finished the documentary, I sat down with Vel and her son Mike, and I played it for them. Throughout the viewing, I was a bit tense. I knew that Vel knew what she wanted, and yet as a documentarian, I had a job to do as well. Nonetheless, I was ready for her at the end to come back with me with a list of what's wrong. But as the film ended, and as the closing credits rolled, Vel turned to her son Mike and said with a smile, "Can we watch it again?" And as we continue to share Vel's story with the world, I think we could all ask ourselves the same question. Can we all watch what she did again and again, take heart all that she accomplished, how profoundly she transformed the world for the better, and try as best as we can to live a life like hers? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Maxine Aldridge White, and I want to thank Michael and the family for including me on the program. I hope that I'm not too froggy and Carrie to get through this short but not so short presentation. I'm very that Reverend me listed now as the filmmaker because you went as the chief judge. So these words won't count against me. I've known the Honorable VelPhillips for 40 years. I'm humbled and honored, Michael, for the blessing that you personally extended to me, to honor and give thanksgiving for a whole lot of folks that you know I also want to express to the family personally what I hope I'm able to deliver today. I met these beautiful children again last night, the grandchildren, the great-grands, the friends, the niece, and the extended family. You look and are exactly as she described, your own people. You are little Velites. You carry the power in your own voice that I heard in hers for years. She was my sister, my friend, my mentor, and my confidant. I first met her in 1978, long before I became a lawyer. And that 1978 impression that I had of her is still the exact same impression that I had of her within 2 weeks of her demise in 2018. I imagine she's up in heaven now, much like the entirety of her journey here on earth. The angels had to sweep aside the clouds, I'm sure, as she burst in through the door, announcing her presence as she recited the words of Psalms 41. She surely took up that commanding stance, all 94 pounds and 94 years, and quietly yet fervently stated, "These things will I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would lead the rejoicing crowd into the house of God, amid cries of gladness and thanksgiving, the throne wild with joy." In times like these, it gives us great comfort to have memories and lessons learned from Vel, lessons which I have worked to incorporate in my life. Paraphrasing the writer Renee Woods, I'm sure that thousands would say that Vel's life was a blessing, her memory a treasure. She was loved beyond words and will be missed beyond measure. We all know that I was not the only student in the Vel Big Dream Club. Whatever message Vel delivered, it was more than a preamble, a simple test. It was more than a dissertation for a PhD. And what I mean, a Phillips healthy dose of get a grip, we can figure this one out. How many people in the audience has a PhD? A Phillips healthy dose of get a grip. You can figure it out. When I met her in 1978, she was Madame Secretary for the state of Wisconsin. She accepted an invitation from what we considered ourselves to be a lowly level of administrators with the Social Security Administration, a bunch of employees who had held out high hopes that we could attract this dynamite of a speaker. She did show up for our Women's History Month. When she addressed that audience of women and men in 1978, it was like prime time. We were mesmerized by her charm, her energy, her story, and her fortitude. She challenged us then, as she continues to do so now, until my last visit a week before her passing. She even said then, "I want you to continue to do all that you can do now to bring a little more freedom and justice into the lives of the children and their families in this community. Our community," she said, "our state and our nation." Between 1978 and 85, we saw each other infrequently at educational events. When I completed my law studies, more than a few friends warned me that if I wanted to be anything in this town with this law degree, I need to pick up the law degree and chat with Vel so I could make sure that I hit the ground running in the right direction. During the past 25 years, we spent hours in person and on the phone, and I thought I was the only one until I heard the other speakers. I think, Mr. Trunson, I surpassed the definition of night owl because of VelPhillips. We spent hours also sitting in my car in front of her condo until the police would come to see if anybody was in the car. We were trying to unravel and solve some situation and strategize and provide some comfort about things that were going on. And she also would hold on to all of those good memories as well as the challenges. And we could comfort each other in times of our loss. In the loss of my mom and my dad and 4 of my siblings, and in the loss of all of her loves, her son, her husband, her friends, her sisters. We could share a comfort with each other. But regardless of the subject, we cherished our special bond of friendship. We were not wedded to how much time we spent, but how much love and respect we had in our hearts for each other. You see, Vel was a change agent, but she never changed from that little girl that we learned that her parents taught. From that complicated, complex, good, smart, strategic, beautiful, classy, spirit-filled and driven warrior being. She was born in 1924, some 30 years before Brown versus Board, and yet she disregarded the voices of inequality for blacks in America. Instead, she was steadfast in her faith and in her belief that daydreams and night dreams should be big dreams, and those dreams were made to be awakened and realized. I knew she was definitely well-suited, an extraordinary candidate for the tutorials she got at an early age from her father, Russell Lowell, and her mother, Thelma. She was on fire each time she calculated an opportunity, not for herself, but for someone else. Her eyes would light up. She extended that petite frame, seemingly thinking that she could grow inches before my eyes. She was a champion when it came to civility. God, I wish I could get that right. She was a great listener. Wish I could win that one too. She was one of our greatest ever navigators of dreams again, following the positivism of her parents. She mentored young lawyers. I'm sure some of us are in the audience. She supported politicians, front row, back row, front stage. Assisted nonprofits in building capacity by extending her name and her reputation. She initiated a great opportunity for community engagement, community brainstorming, and all the power that exists in this audience. Role modeling with and by them and with Vel to put more voice to freedoms in our community. She was 54 years of age when she was elected Secretary of State. But despite the road she had already trod, a road filled with extraordinary successes and some very deep, bitter, and unfair blows stemming from racism, deep-seated racism, and gender and economic biases, she was still absolutely undaunted and not the slightest bit weary or deterred. Vel packed the positives. She filled her cup with the positives, always listening first to our woes, and as only she could softly and instinctively and carefully get me to do. She drove the conversation out of the valley of hopelessness, up the mountainside, where my vision and ideas operated more freely. She always ended with an expression of her strong belief in the power in each one of us for greatness that abides in us, even if we disregard it at times. She was always filled with a contagious idealism. She was persistent throughout it all, the good, the terrible, the wins and the losses. She respected and realized that the foundation had been laid for others by and with her help, and that the price of freedom that had already been paid for so many African Americans was too steep to ever give up on America. So she did not give up on America. As one of her many students, I'm the beneficiary of her transcendent work, her encouraging words and her friendship. Her monumental rise set many records. Some of them are still unbeaten. Some of the titles people don't know as well, she treasured even more. Wife, mom, teacher, mentor, grandma, great-grandma, friend, mentor, social engineer. Her tremendous standing on the right side of the battle of equality in housing, her groundbreaking legal expertise in social justice benefited us all. I witnessed Vel with her familiar sense of urgency to everything, and most things to her were urgent. Nothing was ever small. Even nearing her sunset in the weeks before her passing, I sat and listened, and she expressed thoughts and excitement about some bad news of the day. I noticed she's asked a lot of you, do you have the phone number for Tommy Thompson and Scott Walker with you right now? Millie and I tried to distract her with her favorite treat of popcorn, but she wouldn't have it. She was a force for good all the way to the end. She had a purposeful and a powerful demeanor about herself, and she wanted to bring justice and peace into a troubled world for as long as she could. It's hard to imagine a future without her. We owe so much to make sure that her labor has not been in vain and that her work will not fade into history. We have to make sure that immortalizing this courageous stateswoman of citywide, countywide, statewide, and national significance remains forever in our memory and our pledge to help our children and our families and to do better for and with each other. I would like to close with the words of Elizabeth Browning, a prominent Victorian poet in 1850. She published her Sonnet 43, and since my first reading of it in the 3rd grade, I've recited it thousands of times, often in my youth. I found universal appeals in the words of this sonnet because even though it was written for a different purpose, I found that it actually describes the way we can use words to shower deep admiration and love for such a unique, complicated, good, smart, beautiful, strategic warrior like Vel. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight. For the ends of being an ideal grace, I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need. By sun and candlelight, I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee, Vel, with the love I seem to lose. With my lost saints, I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears. All my life, if God choose, I shall be there and love you forever, even after death. Thank you.